What's up? I'm AJ, and welcome back to Gen Z Garage. In the last two videos, you saw me completely strip the interior and start working on things like the dash. In this video, we're going to be finishing everything else, and we're going to be talking about these amazing new seats. So let's get started.
In the last video, I mentioned that I'd gotten new seats. I reached out to Mr. Mike, who specializes in seat upholstery for both Mazda Miatas and, of course, Pontiac Fieros. I wanted something that respected the originality of the Fiero's factory seats, but that would give a slightly improved look to what the car came with. I opted for a design that looked like the later SE or GT seats, with the Fiero emblem sewn into the upper portion. My dad even ordered a set for his Fiero. But before I could get these installed, I had to strip down the original covers since I'll be reusing the seat frames and cushions. I started with the top, which just easily unzips from the bottom.
Oh, it hurt my thumb.
When the zipper is open, it exposes several hog rings, which must be removed before you can open it further. These can be removed by gripping them with pliers and twisting. I can then more easily slide the original seat cover down and off. You'll run into more hog rings a little further up, and these are removed in the same way. I won't go into the entire process of removing the seats, as Mr. Mike has his own YouTube video to explain how all of this is done. I'll put a link to that up at the top right hand corner of the screen. Once the seat cover is off, I fully remove the cover and gain access to the speakers. I'll talk more about these speakers later in the video. However, I want to talk about the headrests. You may be asking yourself why these headrests are so nasty looking. In all the pictures, it appears as though they are black, and I wondered if this was dirt. It turns out the headrests are sprayed with black paint in the front. That way, when the speakers are installed, you don't see the orange cushion through the speaker vents in the seat upholstery. Another aspect you'll want to consider before installing the new covers is repairing the cushions. Mr. Mike provides instructions for repairing the seats. This allows you to rebuild the bolsters and replace any missing foam. My seats were actually okay, but had several tears in them which needed to be fixed. Everywhere I saw a tear, I filled the entire crevice with Gorilla Glue. This glue soaks into the foam and foams up slightly when dry, creating an impenetrable bond that maintains the original structure of the seat. With the new seat covers installed, I begin reinstalling the seat hardware. If you've come this far in your restoration, don't cut corners. Take the opportunity to clean and repaint these rails. Look at how nasty the originals look compared to the same rails sanded and cleaned up. You'll also want to grease the rails as well. The seats will operate more smoothly, and the overall look and feel of the seats will be so much better. In order to get both upper and lower bolts, you'll need to move the rails up and down to gain access to them. The top has bolt holes while the bottom has slots, which are for any imperfections in manufacturing. So make sure you install the top bolts first. It's also important you remember where everything goes for proper operation. There are a total of 3 springs. I also removed each of these, sanded them down, and painted them with a metal etching primer. In the diagram, the red zeros represent the mounting points for the end of each of the springs. I've also labeled the location that each of the springs go in relation to the seat. This configuration in the diagram is for the passenger seat. Both seats will always have the arm on the left side, but the springs and brackets are reversed for the driver's side. Make sure you take a picture first before taking everything apart. With the seats back together, I carefully install them back into the car. It's easiest to fold the seat forward and slide it in rear first into the car. They're a little heavy, so it helps to have a second person. I wonder where my dad went. I install the rear screws first, and then the front screws second. And if you have seat speakers like mine, don't forget to plug them back in. Oh, and one word of advice. I highly recommend installing the inner seatbelt buckle first before installing the seat. It's incredibly difficult to install these after the fact. Speaking of seatbelts, I clean the original seatbelts by first fully retracting them and soaking the belt in a bucket with dish detergent. I hung the mechanism off the side and used clamps to prevent the seatbelts from retracting. I allowed these to soak for a couple of days and then used a pressure washer on both sides of the seatbelt. Finally, I allowed them to air dry in the garage. Even the driver's side came out looking brand new. Reinstallation of these seatbelts should be opposite of how they came out. Remember, there are 4 seatbelt bolts per side. Each bolt is a little different and has a different combination of sleeves and washers, so it's important that you keep track of where they're removed from and where they go. I installed the lower bolt first, indicated as D in the diagram to the left. This bolt uses a spacer washer and has a slightly shorter unthreaded shank. Next, I installed the seatbelt mechanism, indicated as C in the diagram. This mechanism hooks into the firewall and is then bolted down the shorter, all-threaded bolt with no shank. These 2 bolts must be installed first because the top and bottom of the seatbelt will slide through 2 slots in the interior side panel. With the seatbelts through the slots, I then press the panel firmly into place. You can now install the top seatbelt bolt, identified as B in the diagram. This bolt has a longer shank and also uses a sleeve like the bolt in location D. Make sure you install the plastic housing washer first, otherwise you won't be able to install the cover after the fact. With the seatbelts installed, we also installed the third brake light cover. This third brake light was installed by the previous owner, as 1985 Fieros never came with a third brake light. We used an LED light to prevent the new cover from melting and painted a replacement cover using the same interior paint we used on the rest of the panels. Next, we installed the overhead center dome light. You might notice that this looks a little different. I took the original 1985 console cover, painted the outer portion of the cover, but kept the face of it the same. For 1984 to 1985 Fieros, the area around the lights are painted the same matching dark silver as the gauge and radio surround, and I wanted to keep this, so I only painted the outside light gray. I also modified it by removing the center button and installed all the wiring and the performance sound slider on for the subwoofer, which I'll talk about later. I used the darker gray buttons for the 87 donor console since they matched the dark gray slider as well. Next, I installed a brand new emergency brake vinyl cover, which of course I got from the Fiero store. And with all of that installed, we also went with the new seat recline handles and mechanism covers from the Fiero store, which we painted to match the factory interior color. I also went with a set of new seat slider knobs since the old ones were a little worn out. And now we move on to the gauges. If you remember from a previous video, I sent my gauges to Jack Gunset to be repaired. He fixed a broken odometer servo and recalibrated my tachometer. I'll put the link for that in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. The gauge cluster and surround simply drop into place above the steering column. I painted this with the same SEM paint I used to paint the top of the dash and the radio surround. Next, I reconnect the gauge wires and pull the other wires through the gauge pod as appropriate. The entire pod assembly is held in place with 4 bolts. This includes 2 10mm bolts on the top and 2 bolts at the bottom, accessible from under the steering column. With the cluster installed, I then reinstalled the gauge fascia panel. This panel is held in place using 4 of the rare Torque 80s screws. Remember, only a few cars in the 80s use these, so hopefully you save them. Next, I reinstalled the dimmer switch and then the main headlight power switch. When I bought the car, the headlight switch had been replaced with an all-black one. The correct switch for the 85 to 88 is the 2-color gray and black switch as shown. I then snapped both of these into the switch housing and then screwed the plate into the gauge surround.
There we go. What angle does this go?
Next, I moved to the other side and reconnect the deck lid release and rear defog switches. Both of these switches are new and were purchased from the Fiero store. I then screw the plate back into the gauge surround. Next, I reinstall the under-dash steering column cover. You might notice how dirty and worn out the doors look. Although yes, this is part of the interior, the doors are likely going to be the very last thing I do on the car. I'll replace the deuce strips, install the power door locks, and recondition the armrests and everything else while I have them apart. Finally, I install the rear gauge pod cover, which I've also repainted using the same SEM paint. This is held in place with 3 top screws and 2 lower screws. Both sets of screws are unique to the Fiero to this application. With the gauge cluster installed, I now move on to the stereo.
So, I wanted to keep the tape deck because that's like a staple of this car. I feel like that's so cool to me. And cassette tapes are awesome. So I got the most modern one that I could possibly get, and it also has an auxiliary cord, so I can take my phone or like an iPod or a tablet, I don't know, I could take anything that can fit a jack into this, and I can play music on my through the stereo, which is really cool. And we're gonna be installing the subwoofer in a minute.
The stereo I picked was the top of the line cassette deck in 1989 Pontiac models. It comes with a built-in 5-level equalizer and has the highest output amplifier available for stock Delco radios. It's also been modified with an auxiliary jack, as I mentioned. While it does fit the Pontiac Fiero, it requires a special adapter cable that allows the newer radio to work with the older stock radio harness. Additionally, the radio requires an installation kit, which comes with the brackets needed for installation. 2 clips need to be installed on the side as shown, and then the angled brackets bolt to the clips. For the speakers, I've already mentioned the new Kenwood front speakers that I installed in the previous video. I also went with 2 sets of 4 3-inch headrest speakers from Daytona Audio. Each speaker is 8 ohms, which matches the factory speaker specifications, with excellent highs and lows and a total of 40 watts RMS per seat. Also, make absolutely sure that when installing new headrest speakers, you correctly match up the positive and negatives for each speaker in each headrest, otherwise you'll ruin the sound production and alter the phase of the sound. Now let's hear how it sounds. This is turning out to be really awesome, and I can't wait to finish it. I move on to the center console and install the armrest and center glove box. I slide it back into the firewall notch and carefully feed the power port and stereo jack through the opening. I then push it back and install the 2 7mm screws that hold it in place. These screws are like the other Fiero 7mm screws, but they have much larger integrated washers. Make sure you remember to use the correct screws for the correct locations. I then open back up the glove box and install the 2 7mm screws that hold it to the rear of the console frame. Next, I reinstall the power window switches. I push in the connectors, and then screw the plate down to the center skeleton. Like with many of the other components, the Fiero store reproduces new window switches, and the switch plate bracket as well. The originals were broken and worn out, so this goes a long way in making the interior look nice. Next, I reinstall the power port, or as they used to call it, a cigarette lighter. This is held in place by 2 screws, and has a built-in light bulb that's connected to the illumination circuit. And then, I install my brand new center console shift surround from RW Upholstery. This shift surround is one of the single greatest upgrades you can make to restore the look of your Fiero. It's a mold-injected frame that's wrapped in charcoal vinyl that correctly matches the original color and style. Installation goes on like a breeze and requires only slight modification to the shifter fascia. The little tabs, as shown as the example image, need to be removed so that it sits flush with the console surround. These can be removed simply by gripping them with pliers and twisting. Just look at how nice that looks. Speaking of, anyone notice how nice the shift boot looks? I fixed that too, using a shifter boot bracket from Rodney.
Now, we're gonna install the kit from Rodney Dickman.
I start by removing the original plastic bracket, which is both broken and even missing a corner. Half the dowels are broken off as well.
Okay.
I then install the bracket from Rodney in place of the plastic bracket.
Oh, hello, Onyx.
Finally, the shift boot reinstalled back into the fascia with the supplied washers and lock nuts. And then I tighten them down. You can make these fairly tight, but don't over tighten them or you could break the plastic. And with that, I reinstall the shift knob and reinstall the ashtrays.
They just sit there?
Mm-hmm.
I always forget how these install. Like, they sit and I'm like, is this okay? Where are the doors? What did you do to the doors? Where did the doors go?
Well, I might be missing doors for a little while, but I can install the modified cigarette plate. I drilled a hole and installed the auxiliary jack for my new stereo. It threads in and I install a retaining ring on the other side. Next, I screw the plate into place. Okay, let's see if it works.
So we just installed the audio jack thing so I can connect my phone to the car, and we're gonna test to see if it works.
Throughout your Sunday morning into the afternoon with mostly cloudy skies.
How do I turn off
As a
the...
result, the temperatures top out below average for this time of year in the upper 80s.
Hopefully this works. It works! So it works. That's awesome. I can now listen to music from my phone and from cassette tapes. So that's really cool.
My Fiero is turning out so nice, and I am so excited. But I still have a few more things to take care of. I also replaced the shifter and brake pedal pads.
I got 2 brand new pedal cap things from the Fiero store, and we're about to put them on.
These are fairly easy to swap out, and the Fiero store sells brand new replacements. It may not seem like something you'll see, but it makes a huge difference in overall pedal feel.
Come on, clutch pedal.
And then, we move on to Sun-visors. I ordered a set of new Sun-visors from, the Fiero store. These are made to correctly match the interior. I feel for the sun-visor hole in the corners and make a slight cut with my razor blade. Next, I install the hardware and install the screws in the holes, which I'm able to locate through the hole I cut in the headliner. And then, I repeat the process for the other side. The passenger headliner slides in place with a little difficulty. And then I screw down the retaining screw. I then move back to the driver's side, install the pocket visor, and tighten down the retaining screw. And install the warning and starting instruction sticker. I'll go into more detail on stickers in a later video. I'm really happy how everything has turned out. I'm not completely finished, but I think we've done enough for today. The seats, shifter, dash, gauges, and carpet all look fantastic, and I'm so happy that it's all back together. I still need to finish the subwoofer, which I never got to, and I plan to rebuild the steering column with new ignition and turn signal stalk. I'll also restore the door panels and rebuild the doors, complete with new weather stripping, and, of course, I need ashtray doors. But please stick with me, I'm getting really close to finishing. Before you go, I want to remind you once again to support the SEMA Action Network. SEMA fights for us to keep this hobby alive and protects our rights to modify and restore our cars. It takes just a minute to sign up at semasand.com. Remember, only you can help save the automotive hobby.
Joyriding in a classic like this Model A Coupe, man, there's nothing like it. If you're into cars and trucks like I am, chances are that you know the fight to keep these cars on the road is a never-ending battle. The government targets vehicles of all kinds, new and old, lifted and lowered, rotted and restored. Your help is needed more than ever to safeguard our hobby now and for future generations. This is your call to duty. Get involved and let's keep driving.